Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Next Take podcast. So it's just going to be me for this episode. Because I have been sick, I don't know if I mentioned it. So basically, what's going to be happening, there was an episode that was recorded for last week on Monday. It was never released, but we're going to release it alongside the regular scheduled Monday episode, um, which you will most likely have had already at this point. So I'll do the reminder in that episode as well. But you are going to be getting double the episodes for this week. So you're going to be getting this one, and then you'll be getting another one. So we'll probably spread it out throughout the week. You'll have the Monday's episode and then, so on and so forth. So this one's going to come out on Thursday. Then we'll do one that comes out on Friday. So we catch up because I have been sick and it's kind of just thrown off the schedule in terms of recording. So you are going to be getting 4 episodes this week. Let's get into this episode. So this is technically, I believe, our second? I think it's our second Women's History Month episode. And this one is going to be about Elizabeth Smart, as well as someone who Elizabeth Smart helped, advocate for when she obviously went through a similar situation, and that is Elizabeth Thomas. So we're going to be talking about both of them. So if you are interested in the other episode that we did, that's already been released, that was Alison Botha, who was from South Africa. So if you want to listen to that one, you can. Okay, so let's start the episode. It's been, so I don't know exactly the date of this article that I'm reading, so I don't know exactly, but maybe it's roughly the same. So it's been roughly 8 years since Elizabeth Thomas was abducted by her married high school teacher, Todd Cummings. In 2016, Elizabeth was a freshman so it's been 10 years, Kualaka Unit School after being homeschooled for most of her life. Having faced bullying during her first year in a public school, Elizabeth was struggling, and Cummings preyed on her vulnerability. When she joined his health sciences class that spring, he began grooming her. With a troubled home life, having allegedly faced abuse at the hands of her mother for years, per court documents, Cummings, who was then 50, stepped in to provide stability, but his intentions quickly became apparent when he began to make sexual advances towards the 15-year-old student. For nearly a year, the pair met secretly in the closet of Cummings' classroom, where he would kiss and touch her, quote-unquote, regularly. A victim of his manipulation, Elizabeth was too scared to tell anyone, in fear that Cummings would hurt himself or her family if she didn't comply. The relationship came to a breaking point when another student witnessed them kissing in January of 2017. Cummings was eventually suspended from teaching, obviously, but continued to contact Elizabeth because he's a creep, convincing her that they had to run away together. On March 13th, 2017, Elizabeth and Cummings vanished, leading authorities on a month-long nationwide hunt for the teenager and her abductor. It would be 38 days before they were found in a remote cabin in Northern California. Before his arrest, Cummings worked as a health sciences teacher at Kualaka Unit School, as we said, in Maury County, Tennessee. He had been employed by the district since 2011 after working in the medical field for several years. In 1991, he studied respiratory therapy at Tennessee's Columbia State Community College before obtaining a job at a hospital as a respiratory therapy supervisor. He later became a technician at a medical equipment center and eventually pivoted to his ideal, quote-unquote, second career, which was teaching. Quote, "I have often thought that I would love to be a teacher. I bet you did." That's not on the quote. "And just might excel at it, but it never seemed to be my destiny." And this is what he wrote in a 2011 employment application obtained by People. At the time of the kidnapping, he had been married to his wife Jill for over 30 years and was both a father and a grandfather. He was an avid member of his local church, where he worked with children at youth camps and Sunday schools. He also participated in a medical mission campaign to Panama and helped with disaster relief on a mission to Louisiana following Hurricane Katrina. So, according to a lawsuit later filed against Cummings, the former teacher knew about Elizabeth's troubled home life, they usually do, and befriended her, offering to counsel her in his classroom. From there, he began, quote unquote, grooming, as we know, the 15-year-old student, but they always do. Her father, Anthony Thomas, told People that Elizabeth eventually became dependent on Cummings. In addition to helping with schoolwork, Cummings, quote, gave her money, bought a microwave so she would heat her food up in his room, and try to get her out of trouble. Months later, the situation escalated when he allegedly told Elizabeth that she'd looked pretty nice naked. Ugh, disgusting. Soon after, Elizabeth began privately meeting Cummings in his classroom closet, where he would kiss and fondle her regularly. Looking back, he said she kept it secret from her friends because she was frightened and didn't want to draw attention to herself. Quote, I was scared. I don't want to tell my parent that a grown man kissed me. And I don't want to tell my friends that a grown man kissed me. And this is what she said on ABC's 2020. I don't like the spotlight being on me. And you know he definitely used that to his advantage. He knew she probably wouldn't say anything. According to the depositions of people who were privy to the relationship between Elizabeth and Cummings, there were times when the teacher secretly picked her up from her family's home to go out, quote, threatening her that if she did not go with him, she would face repercussions at school. Elizabeth eventually became fearful of Cummings, revealing to friends that she felt in over her head. She later admitted that Cummings had threatened to kill himself if he could not be with her and threatened harm against her family if she did not comply with his plans. Despite her hesitations, they continued to meet for nearly a year until a student witnessed the pair kissing on January 23rd in 2017. When the student confronted Cummings the following day, he told her that he was a father figure to Elizabeth and thought of her as a close and best friend, per ABC News. You don't kiss a 15-year-old who you see yourself as their father figure, you know? The school created a report on the incident in the week that followed, although both Elizabeth and Cummings denied the kiss. Subsequently, she was removed from his class, but they continued to see each other secretly. On January 31st, sheriff's deputies questioned Elizabeth's father, but he had never been informed about the situation. Several days later, Elizabeth was caught in Cummings' classroom against orders. On February 6th, 3 weeks after the kissing incident, Cummings was suspended without pay after her father's lawyer, Jason Watley, sent a letter to the school board. After his suspension, Elizabeth and Cummings continued to stay in touch per phone records. During that time, Cummings allegedly told Elizabeth that because of the alleged kissing incident, quote, her future collegiate and work career was ruined. Her career in school is not ruined. She's the victim here. Jerk. Thus causing her to believe that her best option was to leave with him. Cummings then began planning their escape. In the days that followed, computer records showed that he researched teen marriage as well as whether his car, quote, could be tracked by law enforcement. He also borrowed money from an unspecified source and filled a prescription for Cialis, a medication used to treat male impotence. Yeah. Disgusting. Early on March 13, 2017, Elizabeth woke up her sister Sarah and made her promise that she would call the police if she wasn't home by that evening. She said, I'm going to be gone, Sarah told People. She had a strange edge to her voice. She said, I'm going to get back at 6 tonight. If I'm not back by 6, call the police and come find me. One of Elizabeth's female friends then drove her to a local restaurant. Elizabeth later shared that she felt if she didn't comply with Cummings' demands to run away, her family would be harmed, She was last seen around 7:45 a.m. Meanwhile, Cummings allegedly emptied his lockbox, which included the borrowed $4,500 and 2 handguns. He also left a note for his wife saying he had gone to Virginia Beach to clear his head and urged her not to call the police. He was spotted by security cameras filling up his car at a gas station near the restaurant at about 8:30 a.m. He proceeded to pick Elizabeth up, and the pair headed toward, I think it's DeCarville, Alabama. Sorry. Hours before Elizabeth was supposed to return home, police were contacted. By 12:41 that afternoon, she was declared missing by the Maury County Sheriff's Department, beginning what would become a month-long stretch for the teenager and her abductor. Shortly after disappearing together, Elizabeth and Cummings went off the grid. Before allegedly disposing of her phone in the Tennessee River, Elizabeth changed the bio of one of her social media profiles to include wife with a ring emoji. The pair then headed west, changing their license plates to ones stolen from an abandoned car and dismantling the GPS. Over the next week, authorities received hundreds of tips about Elizabeth's whereabouts, but many leads came up empty. Meanwhile, the pair had traveled from Alabama to Mississippi and then to Oklahoma, where they would later be seen on CCTV footage in a Walmart. They then headed to Colorado, where they adopted the aliases John and Joanne Castro. Eventually, the pair arrived in California, and Cummings purchased a kayak for $1,500 in San Diego, hoping that they could paddle to Mexico in a kayak. Sure, dude. When that plan didn't work out, obviously, Elizabeth and Cummings pivoted to North California instead, where they came across a clothing optional commune called Black Bear Ranch. According to the commune's website, Elizabeth and Cummings were asked to leave by residents shortly after their arrival, although they didn't know about the abduction because of their lack of access to national media. The two later rented a remote cabin near, I think it's Cecileville, California, which family attorney Watley described as a 4-walled shelter without running water, electricity, or heat piping. There, Elizabeth and Cummings ate wildflowers to survive. According to Griffin Barry, the man who rented them the spot, Cummings claimed that they were from Colorado, telling him that Elizabeth was 24 and Cummings was in his 30s. Something tells me he don't look like he's in his 30s. Barry says he was told the couple had fallen on hard times, and he gave them food in exchange for manual labor around the property. But not long into their stay, Barry saw photos of the pair in news reports and realized who Cummings was. In the late hours of April 19th, Barry contacted authorities, who later confirmed the VIN of the Nissan Rouge they had traveled in. Around dawn on the morning of April 20th, authorities took Cummings into custody and rescued Elizabeth. After being discovered in the remote cabin, Cummings was arrested by authorities and taken to Sacramento County Jail on April 20th, 2017. While Tennessee authorities had already issued a warrant for Cummings' arrest on charges of aggravated kidnapping and sexual contact with a minor, he faced additional charges in the state of California, including alleged possession of stolen property and kidnapping. Shortly after, during Cummings' first court appearance in California on May 9th, his public defender, Benjamin Galloway, issued a statement in support of his client, claiming that he had, quote, no history of violence and no criminal history whatsoever. But he does have a criminal history, even though he hasn't been formally charged with anything. He was sexually involving himself with a minor. That's a crime in and of itself. But anyways, I digress. And that he didn't coerce, force, or threaten Elizabeth. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Even if it's consensual, it doesn't matter. It is still illegal. It's called statutory rape for a reason. Like, come on. Anyways. Meanwhile, Cummings told his sister, Daphne Quinn, that it was Elizabeth's idea to run away. I can't. Again, even if it's her idea to run away, you're the adult in this situation, and you're involving yourself sexually with a minor. Anyways, Ahead of the case going to trial, Elizabeth and her father filed suit in federal court against Cummings and Coalica Unit School, seeking a reasonable amount of damages. The suit alleged Cummings violated Elizabeth's right to bodily integrity, was sexually abusing her as her teacher, and claimed the district failed to protect her from a predator. The following year, in May 2018, Cummings pled guilty to federal charges of transporting a minor across state lines for the purpose of engaging in criminal sexual conduct and obstruction of justice, per the Tennessean. But I thought he didn't coerce her and it was her idea. Anyways, while he had previously claimed to be not guilty, he shared that upon personal reflection, he had changed his mind. Did you? Oh, how nice. Cummings was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison on January 16, 2019. In the courtroom, a prosecutor read a statement from Elizabeth, sharing what she went through on a daily basis as a result of his unspeakable crimes. The effects have been devastating and permanent, and they are not over. Mr. Cummings, what you did to me is unspeakable. I don't know that any words could ever accurately express how much pain I have suffered and continue to suffer because of you, she said in an excerpt from the lengthy statement. She continued, I will have to live with the scars you left on me forever. You preyed upon a vulnerable girl and robbed her childhood. For the last 2 years, I have been picking myself up piece by piece and proving to myself that I am much, much stronger than you convinced me I was. In addition to being put behind bars, Cummings was also fired from his teaching job. Why he wasn't fired before, I don't know. And his wife filed for divorce. That's the right thing to do. Several days after being discovered, Elizabeth was reunited with her family at a private location as she began to recover from the severe emotional trauma that she suffered. While her older brother James said it was a tearful and exciting reunion, he noted that he was worried about how the experience had affected her. Elizabeth's father, Anthony, said those first few days together were a roller coaster of emotions. Sometimes she'll be happy and laughing and back to the same old girl, and then she'll be sometimes just in a fetal position crying. In order to help Elizabeth process the traumatic events, the family recruited some of the best professionals in the country and made sure she felt supported. As a family, they decided to refrain from discussing the kidnapping, opting to leave it to her counselors while she underwent therapy in an undisclosed location away from her hometown. I have to let the counselors work with her, Anthony told People. I've got to let them do their job because I want this to turn out the right way. She's been through a difficult experience. She's got a lot of people to help her, a lot of people who love her with all of their hearts. 6 months after being rescued, Elizabeth spoke out for the first time in an impromptu interview with the Columbia Daily Herald in September 2017. She shared that she was living with her older brother while being homeschooled and working as a babysitter. Elizabeth added that she hoped to attend Middle Tennessee State University to become a medical examiner. I don't regret it, nor do I say it was the right thing to do. It was an experience I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. So where is she now? Since returning home, Elizabeth has chosen to live a private life while recovering from the experience. In late 2018, at age 17, she became engaged to her longtime friend, Skylar Durla, whom she met while working at a seafood restaurant. The following year, the couple tied the knot in a secret ceremony and have since welcomed their first child. We just are homebodies. We like watching movies and just being with each other. This is what she told, I believe, Entertainment Tonight on August 2023. He's a goofy guy. I love him so much. While Elizabeth previously admitted that the backlash in her community used to make her scared to go into stores, which is beyond me. I don't know if anyone has seen the Lifetime movie for this story. I have. It's well done. And well done, but yeah, well done. And when she is back home and her community is like, he is a good guy, you're lying, tell the truth, blah, blah, blah. And it's are you seriously that dumb? Are you seriously that dumb? That because he's a quote unquote pillar of the community, that you think he couldn't do no wrong. We don't know the insides of people's minds and what people are capable of. We never are. So, at the, and I said it before, at the basics of this, even if some weird miracle, which would not be a miracle, but I'm saying, if by some weird coincidence, she is the one who orchestrated everything and she's the one that said they wanted to leave, all of that, it doesn't matter because this girl was a 15-year-old girl at the time that he took her. And he was the 50-year-old or 51-year-old, however old he was. He was the grown-ass man in the equation. And mm, he did the wrong thing. At the end of the day, he's the one that's in the wrong here. No matter how you want to twist this. But at the end of the day, she was victimized by this man. There's just no way around that. And I did open up quite a bit about my experiences, also being a 15-year-old girl, having an older person, not as old as this guy, but an older person take advantage of me. Yes, in the weirdest ways, yes, it was consensual on my part, but it does not change the fact that he was in the wrong and he took a part of me that I will never get back. That doesn't change anything. And it, I look back at it now as an almost 35-year-old woman where I'm like, that should never have happened to me. So it doesn't change anything, however you want to spin it. It doesn't change anything. He is the one who's at fault. And women need to start being believed. Point blank, period. And she has since found her inner confidence and now walks as if nothing bothers me. Because that's the strength of a woman. In 2023, Elizabeth decided to tell her story in her own Lifetime movie, as I just mentioned, Abducted by My Teacher. Reflecting on the experience, Elizabeth said making the film was a part of her healing process and helped her close that chapter. It's given me a little bit of closure, actually, and being able to know that this is no longer happening in my life and being able to look back, knowing that this made me stronger. So yeah, that is Elizabeth Thomas. And the reason I combine them is because, again, Elizabeth Smart really did advocate for her. And now let's talk about Elizabeth Smart. And this is also this was unplanned. I'm telling you that. Falling alongside with the documentary that was just released about Elizabeth Smart, which if no one's watched it, I highly recommend. We did talk about it in one of the episodes that we did, not the Netflix episodes. I can never remember what they're called. Mikel's not here. But anyways, so yeah, we did talk about it there. But now we're going to talk about Elizabeth Smart and the strength that she came out of this and the work she's been doing for women, not even just women, but anyone who is a victim to what she experienced and then some. I think she's a remarkable woman. So let's do this. On June 5th, 2002, a 14-year-old girl named Elizabeth Ann Smart was kidnapped by Brian David Mitchell, this from her home in the Federal Heights neighborhood of Salt Lake City, Utah. She was held captive by Mitchell and his wife, Wanda Breezy, on the outskirts of Salt Lake City, and then later in San Diego County, California. We'll get to it. I think we will. Her captivity lasted approximately 9 months before she was discovered in Sandy, Utah, approximately 18 miles or 29 kilometers for us Canadians from her home. She was abducted at knife point by Mitchell, while her younger sister, Mary Catherine, pretended to be asleep. Mitchell, who claimed to be a religious preacher, held Smart at a camp in the woods with Breezy, sorry. Why am I sorry? Where he repeatedly raped her. During her captivity, Smart accompanied her captors in public on various occasions, dressed head to toe in white robes, and went largely unrecognized by those she came in contact with. Yeah. After her rescue, Smart became an advocate for missing persons and victims of sexual assault. Breezy, whatever, was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison in 2009. Y'all, she's out of prison. I'm just telling you that right now. I don't know how high, but for her role in the abduction, although she was granted early release on September 19th, 2018 for previously uncredited time served. I don't give a There should be no time served. She may not have done the actual acts, but she sure as hell didn't stop the acts from happening. Anyways, Mitchell was diagnosed by forensic psychologists as having antisocial and narcissistic personality disorders, you think? Extensive dispute over his competence to stand trial lasted several years before he was deemed mentally capable in 2010. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole in 2011 by Brian David Mitchell, because we're going to talk about this guy, was born on October 18th, 1953 in Salt Lake City, Utah, the third of 6 children in a family belonging to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS. His mother was a teacher and his father was a social worker. In order to teach Mitchell about sex, his father reportedly showed his adolescent son explicit photos from a medical journal. Why? Like, why? And in order to teach him about independence, would drive him to unfamiliar parts of the city, drop him off, and leave him to find his own way back home. One Lord. Thank you, Father, for creating this man. Anyway, at age 16, Mitchell exposed himself to a child. Great. And was sent to a juvenile hall. At age 19, he married 16-year-old, so he's an adult. I know there's only 3 years between the two, but he's an adult. Okay, but bear with me here. At age 19, he married 16-year-old Karen Miner, with whom he had 2 children. This man has kids. After their divorce, Miner was awarded custody of both children, thank God, after which Mitchell temporarily fled with the children in New Hampshire. Jesus Lord. He resided there for 2 years, joining a Hare Krishna commune. Great. Nothing wrong with Hare Krishna. I'm not coming at Hare Krishna. I'm just saying this guy. Mitchell had a history of drug and alcohol abuse in his adult life. Upon returning to Salt Lake City, he was inspired to seek sobriety by his brother, who had recently returned from an LDS church mission in Salt Lake City. Mitchell had 2 additional children with his second wife, Debbie, who herself had 3 children from a previous marriage. Pretty sure we might know who Debbie is. I'm just saying. Hold on to Debbie for a minute. Debbie alleged, maybe not the same guy, because I know he's been married more than, I guess 3 times. Whatever. Sorry, guys. I'm getting confused. Debbie alleged that Mitchell was abusive during their marriage, and they divorced in 1984. After their separation, Debbie alleged that Mitchell had sexually abused their 3-year-old son. Oh, so he goes for all genders, apparently. God. Sorry. So where am I here? The claim could not be medically confirmed, but Mitchell's future visitations with his children were ordered to be supervised by the Division of Child and Family Services. One of Debbie's daughters from her previous marriage would later claim that Mitchell had sexually abused her for 4 years. On the day of his divorce when Debbie was finalized, Mitchell married Wanda Eileen Barzy. Great. And then 40-year-old divorcee with 6 children. 6. Barzy had a troubled relationship with her children. One of her daughters would later refer to her as a monster, and she also claimed that when she was a child, Barzy fed her pet rabbit to her for dinner. Oh my God. I won't be ignored, Dan, apparently, and said, oh my God. Jesus God. This woman's free, y'all. Together, Mitchell and Barzy became actively involved in the LDS Church. Eventually, Mitchell began going by the name Emmanuel David Isaiah, claiming to be a prophet of God who experienced visions. That's called mental illness. The name relates to Mitchell's belief that he was the Davik servant, spoken of in Avraham Geldi's book, The Literary Message of Isaiah. For this, the two were excommunicated from the church in absentia in June 2002. So not long before he abducts Elizabeth. Barzee began going by the name Hephzibah Elda Isaiah. Oh, God. And the two would panhandle and preach in downtown Salt Lake City. Mitchell presented himself in an image that was akin to the image of Jesus, dressing in white robes and tunics and growing a beard. In the early hours of June 5th, 2002, Mitchell broke into the home of Ed and Lois Smart in the Federal Heights neighborhood of Salt Lake City, where they lived with their 6 children. He abducted 14-year-old Elizabeth Smart from the bedroom she shared with her 9-year-old sister, Mary Catherine. Mary Catherine was awakened but pretended to be asleep and later reported that. Number 1. The man was white, about the height of her brother Charles, who was 5 foot 8 inches, or 172 centimeters, about 30 to 40 years of age and wearing light-colored clothes and a golf hat. He was in fact actually wearing black, did not have a golf hat, and was 48 years old. So close. Number 2. The man had dark hair and also had dark hair on his arms and on the backs of his hands. Number 3. The man threatened Elizabeth with a knife, which 9-year-old Mary Catherine thought was a gun at the time. Number 4. She never got a good look at the man's face, a fact kept secret by the police during the investigation. Number 5. When Elizabeth said, "ouch," after stubbing her toe on a chair, the man said something that sounded to her like, quote, "You better be quiet and I won't hurt you." Number 6. When her sister Elizabeth asked, "Why are you doing this?" the man's reply was not clear to her, but Mary Catherine thought he may have said, "For ransom?" Number 7. The man was calm and soft-spoken, even polite and nicely dressed. And number 8. The man's voice seemed somehow familiar to her, despite his having spoken quietly to his sister, Elizabeth, throughout. However, at the time, though she tried, Mary Catherine was unable to pinpoint the circumstances under which she might have heard it. Hold on to that. This girl is remarkable, so hold on to that. This whole family of women is just remarkable. But let's hold on to that. When she thought Elizabeth and the abductor were gone, Mary Catherine attempted to go in her parents' bedroom, but only narrowly avoided being seen by Mitchell and Elizabeth, who were outside the bedroom of the family's boys. She crept back into her bed, where she hid for an undetermined time, possibly over 2 hours. Just before 4 a.m., Mary Catherine woke her parents and told them what had happened. But thinking she had been dreaming, her parents did not believe her until they found a window screen that had been cut with a knife. On June 6, 2002, Ed and Lois went on television and pleaded for the kidnapper to return their daughter. A massive regional search effort organized by the Laura Recovery Center involved up to 2,000 volunteers each day, as well as dogs and planes. Various websites carried flyers that could be printed or circulated via the internet. After many days of intensive searching, the community-led search was ended and efforts were directed to other means of finding Elizabeth. Mary Catherine's observations were of little use, and there was little usable evidence found at the scene, such as fingerprints or DNA. A search using bloodhounds was unsuccessful. Police questioned and interviewed hundreds of potential suspects, including a 26-year-old who was cleared after being located in a West Virginia hospital. The investigation had the side effect of returning several at-large criminals to prison, but Elizabeth was not found. The Salt Lake City police considered Richard Ricci a person of interest early in the investigation. Ricci was a handyman with a history of drug abuse who had worked for the Smarts. He had been jailed on an unrelated parole violation prior. Ricci then died of a brain hemorrhage in August of 2002 while he was in custody. That part is not here, but I'm going to add that part. That happened while he was in custody. To keep Elizabeth's name in the press, family used a variety of strategies, including making a website about her abduction and providing home videos. After her kidnapping, Mitchell repeatedly told Smart that she was blessed that this was happening to her. What the and that she should be thankful, though Smart refused to believe him. Mitchell forced Smart to walk 4 miles in her nightgown into the woods to an encampment outside of Salt Lake City, where she was met by Wanda Barzee. According to Smart's testimony, Barzee, quote, eventually just proceeded to wash my feet and told me to change out of my pajamas into a robe type of garment. And when I refused, she said if I didn't, she would have Brian Mitchell come rip my pajamas off. Ugh. I put the robe on. He came and performed a ceremony which was to marry me to him. After that, he proceeded to rape me many times. Mitchell claimed to be an angel, and he also told Smart that he was a Davi king who would, quote, emerge in 7 years, be stoned by a mob, lie dead in the streets for 3 days, and then rise up and kill the Antichrist. Smart, he insisted, was the first of many virgin brides he planned to kidnap, each of whom would accompany him as he battled the Antichrist. To keep Smart from escaping, she was shackled to a tree with a metal cable around her leg, which allowed her limited mobility outside of the tent she occupied, or hidden in a hole covered by boards. During her captivity, she was forced to take a new name, and she chose the name Esther, after Esther of the Old Testament. Mitchell also called her Shir Hub, whatever. It was later revealed during court testimony that Mitchell repeatedly raped Smart, sometimes multiple times a day, forced her to look at pornographic magazines. Now that's come back full circle, y'all. And regularly threatened to kill her. He often forced her to drink alcohol and take drugs to lower her resistance, and both starved her and fed her garbage. Smart's abuse was facilitated with the assistance of Barzee, whom Smart would later refer to as the most evil woman she had ever met. Yeah, that sounds fitting. Smart accompanied Mitchell and Barzee in public on numerous occasions, but her presence was either obscured or unnoticed via various methods of concealment, which often consisted of her wearing a headscarf and a face veil. In August 2002, around 2 months after Smart's kidnapping, Mitchell devised a plan to leave Salt Lake City with Barzee and Smart, possibly to Boston or New York City. To research potential places and to relocate, Mitchell and Barzee visited the Salt Lake City Public Library with Smart. There, they were noticed by a library patron due to their unusual styles of dress. Each wore full-length robes with veils, which concealed most of their faces. The patron was convinced to call police after looking closely at Smart's eyes. A police detective arrived at the library and confronted Mitchell, Barzee, and Smart. However, he was deterred by Mitchell, who claimed that Smart was his daughter, named Augustine Marshall, and they were unable to remove their veils or garb on religious grounds. And what can you do in that situation? If you want to scream, just look at her. Take that thing off and look at her. You could save her right now. But on the other hand, it's like, what if you're wrong? Ugh, God, it's just, ugh. When questioned by the detective, neither Barzee nor Smart spoke, and Mitchell stated that their religion prohibited women from speaking in public. Smart would later say that Barzee signaled her not to move, and she gripped her legs under the table. She later recalled the incident, saying, quote, I felt like hope was walking out of the door. I was mad at myself that I didn't say anything, mad at myself for not taking the chance. So close. I felt terrible that the detective hadn't pushed harder. He just walked away. God, I can't even imagine. So close, but yet it's so far, and it's... Oh. Smart also visited grocery stores and a restaurant, but were unnoticed. In the fall of 2002, she attended a party with Mitchell and Barzee and was photographed wearing a veil and robe with Mitchell and another party guest. That party guest, if no one has seen it yet, was on the documentary. And we see the picture. We've seen this picture before. And yeah, he does talk about his experience of being that close to her and not knowing that it was her. So when they moved to San Diego, so in September 2002, Mitchell and Barzee left Salt Lake City with Smart, relocating to San Diego County, California, where they held Smart in an encampment in a dry creek bed in Lakeside. Mitchell and Barzee relocated with Smart several times to different encampments in San Diego County, often moving in the middle of the night. On February 12, 2003, Mitchell was arrested in El Cajon for breaking into a church and spent several days in jail over the incident. And let's just point this part out here because it is not pointed out here. These women were left alone, no food, and no idea that he had been arrested. So, in October 2002, Smart's sister, Mary Catherine, had an epiphany that the abductor's voice was that of an unemployed man the family knew as Emmanuel, whom the family had hired for a day to work on the roof and rake leaves. Ding ding. The police were skeptical because of the short time Emmanuel had worked for the family. How much time does one need to work for the family? He just had to see, oh, they've got daughters. That's all they need. That's all it takes. Like, come on. Yes, the long time that elapsed and the short time Mary Catherine had heard the abductor's voice. However, the family had a sketch artist draw Emmanuel's face from their descriptions, and in February, this drawing was released to the media. It was shown on Larry King Live and America's Most Wanted. The drawing was recognized by relatives of Mitchell, who gave police contemporary photographs of him. On March 12, 2003, Mitchell was spotted with a woman and a girl in Sandy, Utah by two separate couples who had seen photos of Mitchell on the news. The woman was Wanda Barzee, and the girl was Elizabeth Smart, disguised in a gray wig, sunglasses, veil, and t-shirt wrapped around her, around her head, to block that beautiful blonde hair that she has. Both couples reported their recognition of Mitchell to the Sandy Police Department, which immediately dispatched police officers to the location. When asked, Smart told the officers that her name was Augustine Marshall. However, she was recognized as Elizabeth Smart during questioning by the officers, who then rescued her and arrested Mitchell and Barzee, thank God. Even after Smart was separated from Mitchell and Barzee, she insisted her name was Augustine Marshall. Officer Karen Jones handcuffed Smart according to regulations, which is insanity. But Elizabeth does talk about this as well in the documentary and has said many times before that she doesn't hold them handcuffing her against anybody. She knows that it's what had to happen. Obviously, she was scared in the moment. And because also with the religious dogma that had been implanted in her even before this abduction, she had a lot of thoughts at the time, like she's in trouble for something that was done to her, but it's, anyways, documentary is really well done. I'm just going to keep referencing it in terms of this, but anyways, so yes, they handcuffed her, and Sergeant Victor Kozada asked again, "Are you Elizabeth?" And she replies, "Thou sayest." Um, 1 month after the recovery of Elizabeth Smart, the state of Utah superseded the then existing Rachel Alert, so similar to an Amber Alert, with the nationwide Amber Alert child abduction alert system, in part to conform with recently implemented nationwide procedures. Although the Rachel Alert was superseded, this system had seen a success in the 2 years of its existence. At least there was something. So the aftermath. Smart was put in a car to be taken to a local police station. While in the car, she began to cry and asked, what's going to happen to them? Meaning Mitchell and Barzee, which is like, oh, like, oh, okay. Are they going to be okay? Oh, I mean, you want to look at this and just kind of be like, who cares if they're going to be okay? I hope they're not. You know what I mean? But she did live with these people for 9 months. And yes, they were her abductors and her abusers and all of that. But I can imagine that she did grow to have some form of care for them. and wanting them to be okay, which is like, it's it's I'm sure it's very confusing. However, in her 2017 television film, I Am Elizabeth Smart, she denied having Stockholm Syndrome. I don't think that's what's going on here. She then arrived at the police station where she was reunited with her family. When she was back at home, she watched the film, read emails sent by well-wishers, played her harp, let's not forget about her harp, met her family's two new dogs, and slept in the same bed Mitchell had taken her from. The next day, her family threw a party to make up for her 15th birthday, which had passed when Smart had still been in captivity. Though she did not attend, she sent a poster board to the party that read, "I'm the luckiest girl in the world." Um, oh. That day, Smart painted her nails and opened birthday presents. The same day, she had her hair cut by a family friend. And then, many years later, Smart married Matthew Gilmore in February of 2012 after meeting while on a Mormon mission in 2009. They have 3 children, a daughter born in February 2015, a son born in April 2017, and another daughter born in November of 2018. As of 2023, the family lives in Wasatch County, Utah. So, let's go into the legal proceedings a little bit here. The court requested that Mitchell undergo a competency evaluation, as we talked about before, based on his claims of being a religious prophet. While awaiting the evaluation, Mitchell was incarcerated at the Utah State Hospital. Stephen Golding, a psychologist hired by the defense, distinguished between zealous belief and delusion, and concluded that Mitchell's beliefs transcended zeal and were in fact delusional. It was Golding's opinion that Mitchell was not competent to stand trial as a result of his delusions. The court, however, overruled Golding's opinion and found Mitchell to be competent in 2004. Plea negotiations subsequently began between the defense and the prosecution. The defendant was willing to plead guilty to kidnapping and burglary for a 10 to 15-year sentence, not enough, on a condition that Smart should not testify. You. The prosecution refused to drop sexual assault charges against Mitchell because and no agreement was reached. On October 15th, 2004, plea negotiations had still not determined an agreement. The defense appealed as late as October 21st, asking the prosecution to rethink their position in terms of what they were offering Mitchell. Up until this point, the defense did not highlight breakdown in competence as a contributing factor to the deterioration of plea negotiations. They cited the lack of a coming to an agreement as being the result of the sole discretion of their client. The appeal was subsequently rejected. Boom. Jennifer Scheme, a psychologist who initially stated that Mitchell was competent, interviewed Mitchell again per the defense's request in February 2005. After this interview, Heidi Bushi, Mitchell's attorney, filed a brief statement that Mitchell was no longer competent to stand trial. Mitchell subsequently began to act out in court, while jail staff observed no change in his behavior and thought process. Because he's faking it. They all do this. That's why. He's perfectly competent. He's doing it on purpose. Anyways, ultimately, Judge Judy, stop it. Not that Judge Judy, but Judge Judy Atherton agreed with the defense, asserting that Mitchell's behavior reflected psychosis. Okay, the defendant re-entered Utah State Hospital on August 11th, 2005, and remained there until 2008. While he was in the hospital, no staff members observed Mitchell being paranoid in a pathological sense. In February 2006, a bill went before the Utah legislature to allow prosecutors to apply for forcible medication on defendants to restore their competence to face trial. Permission to forcibly medicate Wanda Barzee was also sought, relying upon the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in Sell v. United States in 2003, which permits compulsory medication when the state can demonstrate a compelling interest is served by restoring a person's competence, that medication would not harm the person or prevent them from defending themselves. In June 2006, a Utah judge approved the forcible medication of Barzy so that she could stand trial. On December 18, 2006, Mitchell was again declared unfit to stand trial in the Utah state courts after screaming at a judge during a hearing to, quote, forsake those robes and kneel in the dust. Doctors had been trying to treat Mitchell without drugs, but prosecutor Kent Morgan said after the scene in court that a request was likely to be made for permission to forcibly administer drugs. On December 12, 2008, it was reported that Mitchell could not legally be forcibly medicated by the state of Utah to attempt to restore his mental competency. What? So why was it okay with Wanda Barzy, but it's not okay with him? Make it make sense. Also claiming that it is unnecessary and needlessly harsh, and therefore a violation of the Utah state constitution to prolong trial proceedings to this length. In October 2008, Mitchell's case was transferred to the federal United States District Court for the District of Utah. Issues of competency proved to be the crux of the case, and the court held an evidentiary hearing on Mitchell's competency on October 1st, 2009, and November 30th, through December 11th, 2009. On one occasion during a hearing in October, it was reported that Mitchell burst out singing hymns in court. During one of these hearings, Smart described Mitchell as smart, articulate, evil, wicked, manipulative, sneaky, slimy, selfish, greedy, not spiritual, not religious, not close to God. Mic drop. Like, it's so good. Competency evaluations conducted by Noel Gardner, Mitchell Wellner, and Richard Demir were presented at the hearing. Gardner maintained that he believed Mitchell was fully aware of his actions, but was attempting to deceive the court. You think? Wellner, another witness in the case, reviewed 210 sources and 57 separate interviews, including Mitchell, his wife Wanda Barzy, his family, and Elizabeth Smart. The court credited Wellner with presenting a 206-page report. Wellner opined that Mitchell was competent to stand trial and diagnosed him with non-exclusive pedophilia, antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, malingering and alcohol abuse in a controlled environment. Wellner believed that Mitchell was highly manipulative, you think, and used his religious expression as a way to coax people into overlooking his high function and dismissing him as delusional. Finally, someone speaking truth here. Experts for the defense, including Dr. Demir, a clinical psychologist, did not dispute these diagnoses. They maintained he had concurrent fixed delusional disorder, believing that Mitchell was mentally ill at the time of the crime, and this greatly impaired his judgment. Mitchell was deemed competent to stand trial on March 1st, 2010. So, let's move on to the prosecution and sentencing. Wanda Barzy eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to concurrent terms of 15 years in state and federal prison. However, due to the delays in mental evaluations, it took Mitchell's case almost 8 years to come to court. Mitchell's trial began on November 8th, 2010. The defense acknowledged that Mitchell was responsible for the crimes, but contended that he was legally insane at the time of the crime and should therefore be found not guilty by reason of insanity. Was he also insane when he was molesting his ex-wife's daughter and his son? Was he insane then too? Out of here. The insanity defense for Mitchell was rejected on December 11th, 2010, when the jury found him guilty of kidnapping and transporting a minor across state lines with intent to engage in sexual activity. U.S. District Judge Dale A. Kimball sentenced Mitchell to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bye! Mitchell is currently serving his sentence at U.S. Penitentiary Terre Haute, a high-security federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana. In 2016, Barzy's federal imprisonment was terminated, and she was transferred from the Federal Medical Center, Carswell in Fort Worth, Texas, to the Utah State Prison in Draper, Utah, to begin serving her state prison sentence. She was then released in September 2018, which Smart protested, and I feel like the entire world protested. Why? This, to me, this feels to me like Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka, because it's like, in the sense that, I mean, she didn't serve nearly as much as she should have, and, I feel like, I mean, Barzee wasn't much better, but it feels like that in a sense of these women had more, um, role in these crimes than just being innocent bystanders or just doing what the men tell us to do, like, and they deserve to have served more time. Carla Homolka should not have served 12 years. You know, she should have served a hell of a lot more. She should still be in prison alongside her ex-husband. No, instead she got to be released and live her life and be able to have children. And it's ridiculous to me. And then with Barzee, again, she has more part in this crime against Elizabeth Smart. And she only serves 15 years. It's not enough. It's not enough. Like, I do believe, and if you want to mince here, but I do believe that, like, with the comparison here, Carla Homolka did participate a lot more in the sexual acts against the three victims, one of them being her friggin' sister. Um, but I don't know if Wanda Barzee necessarily did in that sense, but she also didn't stop it. So, all right. In October 2003, Elizabeth Smart and her parents were interviewed for a special segment of Dateline NBC. The interview conducted by the Today Show's Katie Couric featured Elizabeth's first interview with any media outlet. Couric questioned Elizabeth's parents about their experiences while Elizabeth was missing, including the Smarts' personal opinions concerning Elizabeth's captors. Couric then interviewed Elizabeth about school and her life following her kidnapping. Shortly after the Dateline interview, Elizabeth Smart and her family were featured on The Oprah Winfrey Show, where Winfrey questioned the Smarts about the kidnapping. In July 2006, legal commentator and television personality Nancy Grace interviewed Elizabeth Smart purportedly to talk about pending legislation on sex offender registration, but repeatedly asked her for information about her experience. What information does she want? Does she want frickin' details? We don't need that. In response to the questioning, Elizabeth told Grace, quote, "I really am here to support the bill and not to go into what happened to me." Shut the up, Nancy. When Grace persisted, asking Elizabeth what it was like to see out of the niqab, which I don't see why that matters, her abductors forced her to wear, Elizabeth stated, quote, "I'm really not going to talk about this at this time. And to be frankly honest, I really don't appreciate you bringing all of this up." Grace did not pursue further questioning about the abduction, because Nancy Grace doesn't give a about anybody else but for herself. I hate that woman. Smart discussed child abductions on the January 22nd, 2024 season premiere of the rebooted America's Most Wanted with John Walsh and his son, Callahan Walsh. The kidnapping was depicted in the 2003 television film The Elizabeth Smart Story. Like right after she was, wow, that's ridiculous. Wow, you guys didn't waste no time. Which was directed by Bobby Roth and based on the book Bringing Elizabeth Home. It starred Amber Marshall as Elizabeth Smart, which is really interesting because her name she had to go by was Augustine Marshall. It's really interesting. That's so close. Anyway, Dylan Baker and Lindsay Frost as her parents, and Tom Everett as Brian David Mitchell. It was nominated for 3 Young Artist Awards in 2004. The film first aired on CBS on November 9th, 2003, 8 months after Elizabeth was found. In 2017, on the 15th anniversary of her abduction, Lifetime aired the made-for-TV film titled I Am Elizabeth Smart, which I did watch that one, narrated and produced by Smart, which tells the story of her kidnapping from her own perspective. The film starred Elena Borden as Elizabeth Smart, Skeet Ulrich. Why'd you gotta do him so dirty? I mean, it's not like he's not done dirty in Scream, but it's so different. Because that's fake. Why'd you have to do Skeet so dirty? He's probably the hottest Brian Mitchell we will ever see. He really wasn't. He didn't even look like Skeet Ulrich. He looked like that I can't get behind. Can't think you're hot. Oh, Skeet Ulrich is so okay. Let's get off of that. Anyways, Skeet Ulrich played David Mitchell, and Deidre Lovejoy was Wanda Eileen Barzee. Also airing in 2017 was Elizabeth Smart's autobiography from Biography, a 2-hour telefilm. But I also wanted to talk about her foundation as well, because that is the main thing. Like, she is such a huge advocate for women who go through what she went through. And I just want to talk about the foundation just a little bit. So, the Elizabeth Smart Foundation exists to drive social change in the fight against sexual violence. Our education programs adopt a thoughtful, trauma-informed approach and include the perspective of survivors and victims. We envision a compassionate society where survivors are heard, individuals are empowered, and sexual violence is eliminated. Our brand icon is the winged victory of Samothrace. The statue depicts Nike, or Nike, I'm going to say Nike, the Greek goddess of victory, on the prow of a warship. It was discovered during the 19th century in over 100 pieces across the Greek island of Samothrace. Since then, the statue has been restored to its current state, although the head and arms are missing, while broken and incomplete. The winged victory symbolizes triumph, strength, and beauty, even in the face of adversity. It stands at the Louvre in Paris, and it's a very beautiful statue. You can find it if you go to her foundation website. But yes, that is this episode. That is this Women's History Month episode where we talked about Elizabeth Smart and Elizabeth Thomas. So, just to be sure that I am correct that we've only done one other episode here before this one. Yes. So yes, it was Elizabeth Botha that we did. So yeah, we will have the other one that's going to come out for you tomorrow. But until then, that is it for me with this episode. If you liked what you heard, bear with me because I have not done an outro for the podcast in quite some time. So bear with me here. So if you liked what you heard, you can go to any of your favorite podcast apps. You can follow, make sure you don't miss a single episode. And you can also rate the podcast at either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It'd be greatly appreciated. As a reminder, any 5-star ratings that are given to the podcast or any comments that are given to the podcast will be read on the podcast, which I have done in the past. If you want to connect with the podcast through social media, you can find me at Facebook and Instagram at realityt2. You can also find me at Twitter, TikTok, and Blue Sky at realityt2pod. I believe you can email me at realityt2 at hotmail.com, and you can have any inquiries, anything like that, any ideas, any shows or episodes you want me to cover, you can definitely do that over there. And I am going back to our old website, and that is at solo.to/realityt2. There you can get any of the links to anything that I didn't mention here, any of the socials, website, email, all of that. It's all there for you. And we also have a new thing there where you can help support the podcast as well. It's called a tip jar. And you can tip whatever your heart's desire if you want to support the podcast, but don't want to necessarily support the podcast in going to Patreon, for example, or any of the links in any of the advertisements. You can do it there. But since we're on the topic of Patreon, you can head on over to patreon.com/reality tea times two, where there you can get access to even more than what I do here. There are 3 different tiers where you can get these shows ad free, as well as our next tier up where you would get um, another reality show that's being covered. We have Jersey Shore that's been getting covered. That's still being covered currently at the time of recording of this outro, but the future is bright with what's to come in the future, which I will be discussing, or I have discussed. I don't even know. And then also our next tier is a true crime tier as well. So you can definitely head over for that. But that is basically it. I will also just quickly mention here too, if you're interested in a different take of a podcast that I'm a part of, we do things a little differently. You can head on over to Next Take Podcast, where I usually drop bonus episodes here on this feed, but there you get a lot more. And that podcast is making changes. We're growing, doing new things, but you can definitely head on over there if you want to just hear a little bit different than what I do over here. So you can find that podcast over at our website, solo.to/next take podcast. And there we'll have all the links to your desire that will link you to any of your favorite podcast apps or YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of it. Social medias, it's all over there. But of course, you can still find that podcast at any of your favorite podcast apps. But that is it for this episode. We'll see you next time with another episode. Bye, everybody.